MSMF Radio. Music. One language. Awesome opportunity to sit down with Nashville recording artist Derrick Joseph. Take a listen to the conversation that we had in the studio, and you'll have the chance to be a fly on the wall in the life of a real Nashville recording artist. Take a listen.
But now, being my own career has changed. I went from doing that to now having a local band and being a local guy. So, it opens up different doors for me to now go after local festivals and bars and things like that. And which I like. Bars are of course fun. The crowd's there to party. They're there to hear you. You know, so it makes it a lot more. You can be a little wild and crazy. My guitarist has a wireless pack, and I'm wireless, so we can go out in the crowd and play with them, which you couldn't do at the casinos, and
That's
such.
Awesome.
So and we can gear our music towards that. Being just exciting music all night long.
Yeah.
So it's been kind of a nice transition for me too into that. So it's. Everything changes.
And nobody telling you to tone it down.
Now I can do everything I want. I can get as crazy as I want, and everything's fine. So it's like I say, it's a welcome change for me. I'm easygoing. I roll with the punches. When I moved to Nashville, you had to learn that. If you're a real stick in the mud and you have a set way of doing things, you'll never make it in Nashville.
Really?
And you got to learn to roll with it and just. Things change every day up there. Different people come, different people go. And the ways they do things are one way today, and they're a different way tomorrow. And my ex-wife, she had a hard time getting used to. My phone rang 24/7 up there.
Really?
I'd have friends call me at 3 a.m. Hey man, we're going to the studio. Somebody wants to cut. This is a guy you need to know. So come down. So I get out of bed and put my clothes on and drive down to Nashville at 3 a.m. To see a bunch of drunks in the studio. But there was one guy I needed to know. But it's true. That's just how it works. And that's how I met a lot of the people I knew was doing that type of stuff, or trying to get your foot in the door. I had an RV with a big trailer that's what I toured in. But you'd hear of other artists needing a ride somewhere, and I knew who their producer was, or I knew who their management was, and there's somebody I wanted to get to. I got an RV, I can drive you. I didn't care. I'd be a chauffeur because it got me in with those types of people, and that's what made my career go farther, and made me successful up there.
Right.
But you got to learn every little trick like that and take advantage of every one of them up there. It's a crazy town.
So it kind of sounds like that Nashville is sort of like the Nashville you see on the TV show.
Oh yeah, it's that TV show represents it pretty well. It's a crazy city, but it's a lot of fun. It's very stressful. It's funny, like when I started transitioning and try and find a normal job again, people were like, oh, you're a musician, you don't know what it's like to work. Being a musician full time is the hardest job I ever had. Or being an artist, like you say, like for musicians that play guitar or whatever, it's different. You're getting hired, but as an artist who's trying to promote your career, that's the hardest job I ever had. I worked literally 24/7. It just didn't. You were doing something all the time. Live, eat, sleep. And my current wife couldn't understand it because when we first got married and I was on the road so much, was her thing was I don't want you to give up music but being on the road was tough, on us and with the kids and such and she thought you could kind of dabble in it. Well, then we went to the last CMA Fest and she got to meet a lot of the high end artists that I know and one of them is Cowboy Troy. I'm real good friends with Cowboy Troy,
I like him.
and I've done a lot of shows. My band has actually backed him many times when his guys couldn't do it. And he was signing autographs. And I've always talked to my wife about all these people I knew. And it kind of got almost to a point where I don't think she believed that I knew these people because I talk about this guy, that guy, and it got to be kind of like the eye roll, like, So we were standing, the Cowboy Troy was signing autographs, and my kids wanted his autograph. So we're standing in line, and she kind of gave me one of those comments like, well, you know him, right? And I'm like, yeah. Almost like testing me. So we get up close, like meet us through away, and he looks up and he's like, Derrick! He's like, man! He's like, how you doing? I'm like, good. My wife's eyes got like that, And he's like, man, I saw the wedding pictures on Facebook. He's like, that's awesome, da-da-da. And gave the kids big hugs, got them up there, got great pictures of them with him. But we met him later for dinner and talked with him and stuff, and she got to really understand, like, listening to him, like, what is going on with his career, like, now, and how busy he is, and flying here, flying there, doing this, doing that, radio interviews here, and stuff. We left that dinner, and we got to the hotel room that night, and she says, I now understand why you can't be in music the way you were. She said, because you have to live, eat, sleep, and breathe it. And I said, yeah, there's no just keeping your toes in it. If you're going to go after it, you're in it 100%. And you have to have my ex-wife. It's unfortunate we weren't compatible that way, you know. But she understood that, and she knew when we moved to Nashville, it was we were all in. It was that's what we were there for. Everything revolved around my music career, everything, you know. And you have to have somebody like my current wife wouldn't be able to do that, you know. But even for me, I always wanted a family. She has 2 kids. Kind of when we came together, it just seemed like natural. I was turning 40. You know, I wasn't getting any younger, and I was having some label interest, but it was still like, man, I'm years away from making it big, and now I'd have to be on the road away from these guys. It just, at that point in my life, seemed like a better transition of, I can still play music here locally. We're a big deal in Tunica, you know, I'm a big deal locally. And even local musicians knew who I was. They didn't maybe know me, but we'd show up somewhere, or I'd go out, you know, and somebody in the band would recognize me, you know, I could get up and sing. And so I told her, I said, you know, I've made my impression at least here. I'll always still be in music, you know, locally, and, you know, maybe not on the national level, but locally, and I'm happy with that, and now I got a family. So it's kind of the best of both worlds for me, you know.
And we are so thankful to have Derrick Joseph as a part of our local talent here in Mississippi. Here's one of his original songs, Poor Boy's Wife.
She could have had diamonds and anything that money could buy, but she chose the poor boy while everyone was wondering why. Even though he couldn't afford the finer things in life, she still wanted to be the poor boy's wife. And then she had children. She gave them love every day. She made a home for her family on a poor boy's pay. Even though they couldn't afford the finer things in life, she still wanted to be the poor boy's wife. And she's proud of her man, no matter how hard things may seem. And she'll do all she can, no matter how hard things may seem. She's the perfect poor boy's wife. She put her arms around him and said, I know we'll find a way, and I will stand behind you. And then she hung her head to pray. She said, Lord, I know we can't afford the finer things in life, but I'm so happy to be this poor boy's wife. And she's proud of her man, no matter how hard things may seem. And she'll do all she can, no matter how hard things may seem. She's the perfect poor boy's wife. And she's proud of her man, no matter how hard things may seem. And she
I know you mentioned your wife, and I know there's a super special story.
Yeah.
About how you met your wife.
Yeah, she had, I'd been playing down here for a couple of years, and some friends that had become, or fans that had become friends, I was going through my divorce, and they're like, man, we got this girl we want you to meet, and she's great, and she's been through a lot of rough stuff, and we want you to meet her. And at that point in time, I was thinking, man, I've been with my wife 20 years, and like, I'm being single for a while, man. I'm on the road. I'm being single for a while. I'm just going to have some fun, and just, I didn't even want to think about it because I was, all into my career too. I'm like, I don't need a woman tying me down. So I'm playing at the Hollywood Casino, and the friends had come out, and they kept saying, this girl's going to come out, supposed to come out tonight. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll see if she does, whatever. And still in my mind, I was thinking, I'm thinking about that. And I'm on stage singing, and when you're playing at the Hollywood, the way it used to be designed, you could see almost to the front door this one laneway. It was like a walkway down to the stage. And this girl turned in that laneway, and as I'm singing the song, I could see her coming closer, and she had a white shirt on and these faded blue jeans, and so I remember exactly what she looked like. And she walked up, and as she's walking in, I'm like, man, I don't know what it is about this girl. I wanted to know her. I knew I wanted to know that girl. And she comes in and sits down with the people. It's the girl they wanted me to meet. And so first break, I didn't really go out and mingle a whole lot. I went right out front and, needed to meet her and was like totally shy around her. Didn't know like how to, because I knew I wanted to know this girl. And so we hung out that night, and she came back the next night, and she hung out. And it was funny. I played there Friday, Saturday, had Sunday off, and started at the Horseshoe for the next entire week. So I was down here for a week and a half. So she came to all my shows for that whole week and everything. We just hit it off instantly. That was on February 18th, 3 years ago. And so the next February, I had my agent in Florida. He booked us there on the 18th again. And so I had all her family up here from Greenville come up. My family came down from New York. So she knew something was going on. She still didn't know what. We were playing on stage, and there's two songs that I sing that are our songs, two slow song and love songs. So we played them back to back, and at the end of the second song, It's Anything But Mine by Kenny Chesney. I had the band. I told him, just keep playing around that outro. I'm going to get down off the stage, and I'm going to get her to dance. I'm going to propose to her. So I put my wireless mic in my pocket, and I jumped off the stage, and I went and got her, and we were dancing out there in the middle, and it's being filmed and everything. We get all done. As soon as the band stops, I get down on one knee and propose to her.
That is the best.
So, yep. So I proposed to her, like you say, at the same place I met her. And then we had our wedding at the Terrace Hotel, because that's where we spent a lot of the time, because I was still on the road and stuff. So they had a great service for weddings and things. We've been looking all over for places to have it. And I said, we met at the casinos. Everything was based around the casinos. So we ended up having our wedding right there at the Terrace. So that was kind of like, our little love story.
That is really romantic.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. She's a great girl. Like I say, I never thought I would give up music. And not that I've given it up. I never thought I'd give up the road or Nashville. Once I had it, and I met her, and everything changes. Women, you do that.
I know, see? Well, that's true, though. But all is not lost, because I was just reading an article that said that Mississippi is like ranked in the top 10 of the most hip states as far as our musical taste. So you're still in the fold with the hip stuff.
Well, that's the thing. Like the area here, I mean, it's a great area. Having Memphis, right here with so much talent, so many different genres of music. I mean, you're known for their blues, but there's every kind of music here. It's very similar to Nashville, because like you think of Nashville as being just country music. The rock scene is unbelievable. You have rap, you have soul. I mean, you have everything in Nashville. And so when I moved away, it was like, okay, what am I getting into down here? There's still all that different music down here, even, which is great. Because like for me, I like all different types of music. One music, quite honestly, I'm not into is rap. I don't get it. I'm
not crazy about a lot of it.
But I mean, like, I like jazz, I like classical, I like R&B, I like the blues, but I like country, I like rock. So for me, I can see everything I want down here. If I'm bored tonight and want to find something, there's going to be a classic rock band somewhere, there's going to be a soul band somewhere, there's going to be a funk band somewhere. You can see anything you want, which I love that, being a musical person. So it's still a great area, down here. As compared to even Nashville, it just seems like a smaller version of Nashville, But there's, like I say, the musicians are great. I've met tons of just great personalities, easy to deal with, just love to play music. Because the difference here is a lot of them aren't playing it for a living. They're good enough to, but they aren't. So they play it for love of music. And you find that in Nashville sometimes. It's unfortunate, but like anything, if you like to scuba dive and you do that for a living, all of a sudden you don't like to scuba dive anymore because it's your living. It happens a lot in music. You get into it. When you played around your hometown once a week, man, it was fun. Love to do this for a living. Then you move to Nashville and you're playing every night and you have to make money. Now it's a job and it doesn't become as much fun, and guys fall into that trap a lot. Where, like, say now the guys that I have in this band are all ex-road guys who don't rely on the music for their money. So now it's just fun for them. And it seems almost like they put more into the music because they're doing it just for fun. They want to be in a good band. My bass player was a Nashville bassist, done the whole touring thing, and he's good enough to be in Nashville. He has a daughter down here and he wants to be here. So for him, he still wants to be in a high-level band. And he was telling me the last band he was in was just, he said he was literally embarrassed to have his friends come because they weren't the talent level he was used to. And he said, he realized it was time to go because it just wasn't. And he said it's funny because he had just told them like a couple nights earlier, then out of the blue I called him like, hey, I'm trying to build a local band. He'd always wanted to play for me. And so he joined up with the band, and then the drummer I have is most everybody in the music scene here knows him. His name is Donnie Mars. And he's played for tons of different bands, and he played for Gabby Johnson, who was big down here. Well, they were finally breaking up after they've been together like 18 years. They were calling it quits. So he was looking for a new band. So I got a hold of him. I'm like, hey, I got a great bass player. Want you in the band? So he's like, yeah, I'll get in the band. And I was trying to find a guitarist, and I just couldn't find one of the level I needed or wanted. And they kind of knew different styles, so we don't play just country. We do country and southern rock and classic rock. So I needed a guy that was a little bit versatile, but I wanted a guy that could chicken pick, they call it, playing with the fingers, and play slide and play Van Halen. And this guy, he happened to be playing for a girl. Her name's Angela Langford. She does a lot of acoustic gigs around. She plays in Hernando quite a bit.
Yeah, I think I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's real good. And she had a thing on Facebook that she was playing at Windy City Grill. And I was reading through it, and it said something about Fairport, New York. Well, Fairport, New York was about 15 minutes from where I grew up. So it made me, I was like, okay, I got to find out what this is all about. So I click in there, and it turns out it's the guitarist. He's from Fairport. So I sent him an email, and I'm like, man, I see you're from Fairport. I'm from Phelps, and just small world, that you live down here, this and the next thing. He's like, well, we're going to be playing in a couple weeks, up at Watford's in South Haven. I said, well, we'll go out and watch him. So we went out and watched him, and he was awesome. You guys just tear it up. And has the look, and just can do everything I want. Watched him play. It was just, and so I got talking to him, and I said, look, I'm not trying to steal you away from her, because that's, you just don't do that. Not if you want a good reputation. So I said, if you're ever looking for more work, I'm building a band. I said, I have an awesome bass player, awesome drummer. You would be the next step. He's like, well, it's funny. I just started looking to try and join a regular band. So I sent him my song. He's a teacher. This was the middle of summer, so he had the time to really learn all the material. So we get their first rehearsal, and he starts playing. My bass player's looking at me just like, wow, look at this guy. And the drummer, too, is looking like, man. And I told him, I said, you don't have to learn him as good as you know him. He knew every little bit of that song, and he had every little sound and tone. I said, I love that you learned it that much. I said, but you don't even have to learn them that good, and it'll still be awesome, And so it ends up, us four playing, and I'd been looking for a rhythm guy, and I couldn't find a rhythm guitarist that I liked, and that had vocals that were good, and because we needed somebody for harmony vocals. I end up bringing Angela into the band now, and she plays a little bit of rhythm guitar, and then she does a lot of harmony vocals, and then I'm letting her start to sing some lead on some stuff too. So she kind of rounded out the band now. So it's all locals, and all people that are heavily involved in the music scene. So it's been like a big full circle, but now I'm back to being local, but I have just an awesome band. So that part I love of it.
And that awesome band has put out some awesome music. This is your original song, hit single that reached number 66 on the charts, No Cool Way.
gets on its feet. Love might take forever, a second or a minute. There ain't no cool way to do it when a man's falling in it. It's like riding in the back of a pickup truck, sitting on a bench, waiting for a bus, stepping on a rake, drinking bud through a straw, watching her, watching him, walking the walls, like falling off a log. There ain't nothing to it. When you're falling in love, there ain't no cool way to do it. He can pull his hat down and put on his shades, but a silly old grin still gives him away. And when he tries to talk, the words come out wrong. There ain't no cool way to do it when he's gone, gone, gone. It's like riding in the back of a pickup truck, sitting on a bench, waiting for a bus, stepping on a rake, drinking bud through a straw, or watching her, watching him, walking the walls, like falling off a log. There ain't nothing to it. When you're falling in love, there ain't no cool way to do it. It ain't cool to be acting like a fool in love, 'cause when a man is falling, when he knows he's falling, it's like riding in the back of a pickup truck, sitting on a bench, waiting for a bus, stepping on a rake, drinking bud through a straw, or watching her, watching him, walking the walls, like falling off a log. There ain't nothing to it. When you're falling in love, there ain't no cool way to do it. Yeah, when you're falling in love, there ain't no cool way to do it. No cool way to do it. Just ain't.
All right, so let's sneak back into the conversation and hear what he has to say about his band, Derrick Joseph.
Keep my feet wet into it, and still be a high caliber band, because I was like I mentioned, I was spoiled with the musicians when I first moved to Nashville. Now I've still got that caliber. And I hate to say that sometimes, because it makes you sound like you're arrogant, but when you get used to, when I lived in New York, I had a stacked band. My bass player was an ex-Nashville guy. My guitarist had done the LA and Florida scene. He was pro quality. My drummer was he had been on the road for like 15 years, professional drummer from England, and I played drums for 20 years. This guy could do stuff I couldn't even think of doing.
Wow.
And my rhythm guitarist was a major of music at the Eastman School of Music up in Rochester, New York. And we had a keyboardist that could do anything you wanted on keyboards.
Wow.
If you needed congas or needed someone to play some extra bass parts, he'd have 3 keyboards, and he'd have one hand in one time and another one doing a different instrument.
Wow.
I don't know how I could keep it straight. I can't even think
Amazing.
that far ahead. But he would be doing different things. We'd play a lot. We'd play a song by Kenny Chesney. It had a lot of Caribbean type sound and stuff in that. He'd be playing that with one hand, one type of Caribbean sound, another type with the other hand, and keep it all in time. And it was just awesome. So I had a stacked band back there. As soon as we stepped on the scene, it was funny because I had just started singing. How I got into it, we had went to, I'd been sent to Gulfport, Mississippi on business. I worked for Rite Aid, and I was a corporate trainer for them. And I was supposed to be going to Atlanta, Georgia. And my DM calls me on Sunday night. He says, "Hey, you're not going to Atlanta tomorrow." I said, "Okay, whatever." He says, "You ever heard of Gulfport, Mississippi?" And I laughed. I said, "Yeah." He said, "What's so funny about that?" I said, "My dad lives there." And I hadn't seen my dad in something like 6 years or 5 years or something like that. And because he had moved down there. And he worked for casinos down there. And he said, "Well, you're going there tomorrow morning." So I fly down there, and my dad had gotten really into playing guitar. And he had a guy that was his teacher or mentor who could have made it in Nashville. The other 2 people he was in bands with did make it. He was married and had kids at the time. He chose not to go. Well, the other 2 made it big. But he was super talented. Any stringed instrument there was, he could play it. I don't care what it was. violin, fiddle, bass, guitar, played it all. And my dad, in a matter of a couple of years, became a great guitarist, under this guy, and got into singing and everything. So I was down there on business, but I'd work my 8 to 5. And when I was done, I'd go. My dad lived like 10 minutes away from where I was, so I'd go to his house every night. And that weekend they had a big party, and my dad was singing, and they had a karaoke thing set up, and he's like, you gotta get up and sing. And I wasn't about to get up and sing. My high school friends will tell you I was the last person you'd know walk in a room. I didn't draw attention to myself. I was very shy. When I played drums, I always sang background harmonies, but I had a huge drum kit in front of me that you couldn't see me. I had cymbals hanging up there. You were not going to see me sing. I was so scared of it. So finally, I'd had enough drinks with my dad bugging me enough. I said, okay, I'll sing. So I got up and sang, and I got done with the first song, and people just kind of sat there. And a couple people clapped. I'm like, man, that must have really sucked. So I sang another one. I got done, and everybody was like, man, you can really sing. So I went back to New York, and there was a local band that was real well known up there called Bad Habit. And there weren't any country bands that I could find that needed a singer, but these guys did like rock and stuff. And I said, well, I'm going to go try out for them just for the experience. I wanted to see what it's like to go try out for a band and what I need to work on. And so I go and get there, and there's 2 or 3 other guys there to try out too, or whatever. So we all sing a couple songs and everything, and I'm like, I know nothing about doing this stuff. So I get up and I sing and everything, and a couple days later they call me and offer me the job. Well, I didn't have any intention of taking it at that time. I just wanted the experience.
Right.
And so I took it, and I had no stage presence. The first gig we play is a New Year's Eve gig at a bar, and the place is packed, and I literally have no stage presence. I sing the song, get done, I don't know what to say, what to look at, what to do, and so I kept working at that, and I sang with them for about a year, and still didn't have a ton of good stage presence. I was still learning, and I was forming my own country band, and we didn't have a really good guitarist, and guitarist I knew who was awesome, the one that had done the LA scene and Florida scene, he had just quit the best local country band. He had just quit their band. So I called him and I said, hey, I'm building a band. You want to come try out for this band? He said, sure. So he comes out, and I had a whole studio set up in my basement, and he comes out and rehearses with us and everything, and he just tore it up. I mean, the guy's awesome. Wow. And I waited a couple days, and I didn't hear anything, and so I wait another day or two. I'm thinking, I'm going to give him a call. His name is Dan. Pretty soon he calls me. He says, hey, Derrick. I say, hey, Dan, how you doing? What'd you think of it? He says, you got the good start there, good basis. He says, but I don't want to join your band. And I was like, man, this is the guy we needed. He's like, I don't want to join your band. And I said, okay. I said, well, I appreciate you coming out. He says, well, I'm not done. He says, I'm building a band. He said, I want you to come sing for my band. I told him, I said, man, I don't have a lot of stage presence. I said, he's like, no, I know, you're rough. He says, he's brutally honest, But I wanted him to be, and I like that, because you never get any better if people candy coat it to you. If you're a baseball player and people tell you, yeah, you hit great, and you don't hit great, you're never going to become a great hitter. So he's like, I want you to come sing for my band. So we started rehearsing. Like I say, we got all these members in it that were just awesome. There was so much hype behind this band by the time we played our first show. There was a club up there called The Roost. And it was standing room only at 9 o'clock when we went to get on. That place is never that packed. And we broke all the records, that they had for sales and stuff like that. We were the hot ticket as soon as we started.
Wow.
And so that kind of took off, and I got some more stage presence. I watch video now of back when I first started. Man, I was terrible. I didn't know how to move around a stage or talk to people or what to do, And but I got some stage presence there working with these guys, and we played for a couple of years up around there. And I had a buddy that was traveling to Nashville and trying to make it and get a record deal, and I would go along with him just to watch and see what it was and watch what he was doing. And he would get songs from writers that they'd send him songs. Hey, I want you to sing this song for me for a demo, or just he'd be looking for songs to record for his CD. And so he told me of a website to go to put an ad on there, and I could get some songs, and so I put an ad on, and I had boxes of CDs sent to me from people. Wow. I mean, just thousands of songs sent from one little ad that I posted on this
really?
website. And some of the worst music you ever heard in your life, and some awesome music. You know, I mean, really, just the range was huge. And I had a couple of songs come to me that I really, really like. I like slow songs or songs that tell a story and stuff. I mean, I love modern country, but compared to what it used to be, every song used to tell a story, and you knew that story from start to finish by the end of it. Now you get a lot of rump shaking songs, and they're just
the
fun.
donk-a-donk.
Oh yeah, I mean, you get a lot of that. Luke Bryan right now, all he has to do is shake his butt, and girls will buy that CD.
Right.
But there's a lot of songs just about that type of stuff. But I still like songs that tell a story. And I had this CD sent to me from a company, and it had some slow songs on there. One about their father passing away and such, and just great slow song ballad type of stuff. And they had a couple higher tempo songs that were really good. And so I got a hold of the publisher, and I said, I'd like to use these songs on a CD just to record, just to hear myself. Never heard myself on an original. I could sing Hard to Handle, and I could sing, Sweet Home Alabama, but I wanted to hear what I sounded like on a original song. So they said, yeah, you go ahead, but we have to hear it before you ever do anything with it or whatever. And I said, okay. And so I recorded it up in Rochester, New York, and they aren't great at recording country because there's not a lot of country recording going on at the time. They record it like pop and rock. Well, it came out very pop sounding. And so I sent it to him, and I said, well, this is what I got. It's not great or whatever, but this is what I got. And he says, well, you mind if we send this to a couple of record labels? Wow. And I kind of laughed at it, like, yeah, whatever, send it to whoever you want, send it to Sony, I don't care, let's see what we get, And so he sends it out, and pretty soon the one record label owner is one who wrote one of those songs, and he called me, he says, how serious you are about singing? I said, well, I like to sing, I enjoy it. He's like, no, I'm not. He's like, would you ever consider singing, for a career? I said, I'd love to, I'm not that good, He said, well, I'd like you to come to Nashville and record some stuff.
Oh my gosh.
I said, okay, so we go down to Nashville, and he takes me to this studio, and it was kind of a neat thing for me. There was a song my band did called Country Was My Rock by a guy named Trent Tomlinson. But the guy who wrote it, Tony Ramey, we walk into his studio, and that's Tony, and the big gold records on the wall, and I'm like, man, that guy wrote the song. I sing in a band. It was like so surreal, my first taste in Nashville. And we go in the studio, and I start singing the first song, and it's a ballad. It's a really hard ballad to sing. And the vocal that was on it, come to find out, Tony had sang, and he's got an unbelievable, I would pay money to have his voice.
Wow.
And so we're singing along, and he'd stop. He'd say, sing this different. Okay, we're going to go back. He says, sing that different. Okay. This next one, I want you to, do some influx here, or take it out, or do a little vibrato here. And I barely knew what vibrato was at that time, And we get done with the first song, and I'm thinking, man, I'm just bombing this. And he says, okay, we're going to go to the next song. I said, okay. And by this time, all my confidence is long gone,
No.
And so we go into the second song, and the same thing. He's, stop here, do this, go back to that, use this one different, stretch that word out, condense that word down. I'm like, man, I'm like, man, I just suck. Can't even think about these guys got to be thinking about me. And he get about halfway through the song. He's like, that's enough. Come on back in the studio. And I'm thinking, yeah, I'm done. So we get back in the studio, and we're sitting there and talking, and he's talking with Tony, and they're talking to me, and what'd you think of it? I said, it's a neat experience. I've never been in a studio like this, And he says, well, how serious are you about this? And I said, serious about what? He says, you want to do this for a living, or do you want to just play around in it and be a local band, whatever? And I said, yeah, I've never really thought of it as a living portion. And he said, well, it's time to think about it. And he slid a contract across and said, we want to offer you a contract.
Wow.
Man, nah. I'm like, my heart was just like, and, it's not, I didn't expect that when I came there. So, and I had a rental car, I had flown down. So I'm like, well, okay. I said, I got to think about it, whatever. They're like, yeah, we want you to take some time to think about it. Let me know in a week. So, okay. So I got out the car, and I'm instantly call my wife, and I says, you'll never believe just what happened. And she said, well, what happened? I said, they just offered me a contract. And she flipped out. She's like, contract? Like singing music? I said, yeah, singing music. Want to put a song on the radio, da-da-da. So I got home and I spent all week calling back and forth with them, asking different things and talking to music attorneys, of course, and things like that. And ended up signing with them, and they brought me down to Nashville, and we recorded 2 songs.
And here's one of those songs right here, a song that I personally love, 17 Again.
Taking the morning walk, cutting through Sunset Park. The sprinklers opened fire on me. Just like that, I was under siege. There in the wet grass was a couple in love, having a blast. Piggyback riding, rolling around, laughing while they were getting doused. I swear those 2 were only half my age. I thought about us as I turned and walked away. We'll never be that young again, but we can still feel what they were feeling, going left like there's no end. Steal your heart like I did back then. Love like was 17 again. Opened the bathroom door, saw your wet clothes on the floor, heard you singing in the shower. Baby, what you say we go picking wildflowers? You were so surprised when I said let's go outside, go to the park and have some fun, rolling in the grass like we were young. I won't forget the way we felt that day. There's nothing wrong with acting half our age. We'll never be that young again, but we can still feel what they were feeling, going left like there's no end. Steal your heart like I did back then. Love like was 17 again. Whoa. Steal your heart away like I did back in the day. Live like there's no end. Like we're 17, we'll never be that young again. But we can still feel what they were feeling, going left like there's no end. Steal your heart like I did back then. Love like we're 17 again.
The band they built for me, we recorded at Ocean Way, which is one of the premier big recording studios there. George Strait records there. Tim and Faith have shot videos there. You know, it's a beautiful facility. And so he tells me, you know, we're going to build this band for you to play. Well, I had Loretta Lynn's drummer, I had Willie Nelson's keyboardist, Brooks and Dunn's bass player, Trace Atkins guitarist. I'm trying to think who else I had on that. That might have been it. Doug Jernigan, he's one of the most well-known steel players in the world. He's in the Steel Hall of Fame and stuff. He played on it. So, I mean, just, again, a stacked band of players. I mean, these guys just had an unbelievable amount of experience. And it was the neatest process, though, to see, because I played drums, but I didn't read charts. I did everything by ear. You know, and you'd practice, even like my band in New York, you'd practice for 3 months before you play your first show. You know, and you go over the songs a million times. We get to the studio that morning, none of them have ever heard the songs they're going to record. They get charts handed to them. They play the song one time over the PA, and they're like, anybody need to hear it again? They're like, oh, yeah, let me hear that solo again. So they play that really quick. So you guys hear the song 2 times walk out in the studio with these charts and nail it like they've played it for 10 years.
Wow.
I was blown away at that. Just the amount of talent that these guys have.
Yeah.
And the guitar solo, they only recorded 2 or 3, and he had it just awesome, after it. And, of course, I'm trying to sing to it all and everything. And I was nervous as all get out. I mean, it's just, big studio, awesome place. The vocal mic they had me singing into is like a $30,000 microphone, And the president of the Ocean Way comes in, and he's talking to us. We've taken a little break because I'm trying to, settle down. And he says, how you like it here? I said, this is awesome. It's an unbelievable place. And I recognized the room we were in from a Tim and Faith video. I'm like, man, I've seen this room in a video. He's like, oh, yeah, lots of videos been shot here. Stuff. And he's like, Randy Jack, which is the president of the label, he says, he tells me you're a little nervous. I'm like, man, I said, just
a little.
I said, I've been in a studio 4 times in my life. I said, I know nothing about this. I said, I'm nervous, nervous as hell. And he says, if this settles you down, he says, the room you're singing in? I said, yeah. He says, that microphone you're singing on? I said, yeah. He says, last week George Strait was singing in that microphone. I told him, you didn't just calm me down. You just made me even more nervous than I even was, But we recorded 2 songs in there, and the first one that we released to radio was called No Cool Way. And
I love that song, by the way.
Thank you.
I love that song.
It was just a catchy.
Talk to you about that
it's
song.
funny. It's not really my style usually of music. But it just had a catchy kind of little thing to it. I don't know what it was. My band always picked on me about it. But it was just, there's something about that song kind of caught my attention.
There's a truthfulness to it.
Yeah, there really is, and it was kind of still told a little story in it. And that was what relates to me. And so we released that to radio. And I had the best promotions team you can have in Nashville. Rascal Flatts still uses one promoter, and her name's Debbie Gibson Palmer. She was one of the promoters I had. I had a guy named Sam Cerami who has discovered just about anybody who's anybody up there. He's the best of the best. Well, he's best friends with the owner of my label. That was the only reason we got this guy.
Wow.
I can't remember the names of the other 2 ones, but we had a 5-person promotions team that was it. They were it. Jerry Duncan, that's the other one. Everybody uses Jerry Duncan. Anybody who's anybody. We had a really small budget. Not. The old saying was in Nashville, it was $1 million to make it. You knew it was $1 million if you were going to make it. And now it's 1.25 is what they'll invest, in a new artist or whatever to make it. But we were operating on a $40,000 or $50,000 budget, and so Sam would bring me in. He's a super nice guy, older guy, funny as heck. And you get in his office, he's got signed autographs from everybody who's anybody, and he's helped them all, and he's worked with them all, and I'm just feeling so inferior to everything, And he told me, he says, be prepared. He says, generally, if, debut single from an unknown artist on a small label, we ain't got much hope of really going anywhere with it. He said, you'll be lucky to chart if it even does chart. He said, I just want you to be prepared. And it's a lot of money to buy these guys. And I'm like, man, we're putting a lot of money out here for, nothing. And so, okay, it is what it is. He's like, the second song is a song generally, you build a little interest in the first one, the second one will take off, a little more. So I was totally prepared for that. We released it in December of 2008, and 4 weeks into the release, we charted. And we jumped on at 149 on Music Row, which there's the big chart is Billboard. The second biggest one is Music Row. And it continued to just kind of climb and climb and climb on there. And it was how I became friends with Chris Young at the time, is because his song and my song were running neck and neck up through into the 70s or whatever. So I'd met him at different functions and stuff, and we ended up being on the charts for 27 weeks altogether. And we made it to 66. And we were about to make a bigger jump. A couple confusing things happened with some radio stations, and it's hard to get any airplay. And you can't have a song over 3 minutes. And if you're a nobody, you're not going to get much hot rotation. But we were getting there was a station in Kentucky spinning us 27 times a week, which is
really
extremely
good.
hot rotation. I'd been up in some those music things where they put your song against an artist, and I'd gone against a Gary Allen song, and I'd gone against a Keith Anderson song, and been winning out in California and Oklahoma, and it'd been going real good, but there was some confusion in one of the promotional things we were trying to do, and the station dropped off by accident when they were supposed to add me. Pretty much once that starts, it kind of starts a snowball effect, and we just fell off. But for the budget we had, to go as far as we did. And I ended up being in Country Weekly magazine. I was in the May 2009 issue of Country Weekly magazine. Played CMA Fest for the next 3 years. I've been on the Hard Rock main stage. Had a write up on the CMA website. As a nobody, got a write up on there of how when we started the show there was no one there, but we were the next big thing to watch out of Nashville, and so we had a lot of success, and it was a fun ride. I mean, I enjoyed every minute of it because the people I got to meet, I never thought I'd meet, and I used to tell them, if you'd asked me 10 years ago, you think you'll ever know this person people. Or that person, or someone you're watching on CMT, watch videos and watch all these players. I didn't know any of them. Now I watch CMT. I know half the guys that are in these bands, and they've either played for me or I just know them, from around. And I never thought that ever happened to me. I was a nobody. I worked in retail and had a construction company at that time. And I didn't know the first thing about music. So it was really just a surreal experience to go from being a nobody. Not that I was a somebody, but I mean, go from being a construction guy to all of a sudden doing a radio tour and going to stations and giving interviews and bringing the band and playing shows and opening up for other artists and different things. It all happened so fast.
How'd you deal with all that? Like, you hear those stories about musicians that unfortunately they fall into drugs or alcohol, or they just can't deal with all that constant scrutiny. Like, you radiate. Like, I can tell that you love it. Like, you're still on top of your game.
Yeah, for me, I've seen drug abuse and I've seen different people go through it, so it never has interested me to go into the, coke or heroin or something. I see a lot of guys ruin their careers. Yeah. A couple guys out of Nashville that I met and know that were, they're the next big things, or had songs on the radio, mainstream guys, and their careers just fall apart because they can't stay away from that. I knew I had one opportunity to get there, and I wasn't going to blow it on drugs. That was my thing. To me, it was senseless, stupid way to lose something. To me, I knew I had that one shot, and I had to keep my nose clean. My band used to pick on me because I'm not a big drinker. I'm not your typical road guy, that goes out and parties after every show and you can drink a fifth of Jack Daniels, and not. I was usually the first one in bed at night, and I drink a few drinks, and I'm happy with that. I know what my limit is, but I knew I wanted, because it's very easy to get a bad reputation, too, on the road or in Nashville, and that's the last thing you want. Nashville's accepting of certain things, but they're not accepting of other things, and you need to keep your nose clean, and I tried to, as much as I could, keep my nose to the grindstone. I knew what the end goal was. That was where I wanted to be, so to me, the ride was enough to not want to fall into those other, the demons portion of it, because it was just so much fun, Like I say, to think of ever playing on a Hard Rock main stage, man, that was when I forgot the news I was doing that. That was awesome, and and my band just tore it up, When we got up there, they loved it, and we were the hot ticket that day, and so that alone was more fuel for the fire, It's just everything was going right and going in the right direction, and it was just so much fun, and the last thing I needed was to lose it for something stupid, So, but it's weird. I remember getting used to not getting up and going to a job every day. I was home all the time, and you get bored fast, and your mind likes to wander, and it's weird, transitioning from a day job where, like I say, I used to have a construction company. I get up every day, go swing a hammer, come home, made money, and till all of a sudden, all right, today I got to send out EPKs, and I've got to do this, and I got to do that. I got to call this manager. I got to schedule this thing, or go do this interview, and it was weird because it went from not being 8 to 5 every day to just whatever time, Night Rider Radio happens at 9 o'clock at night. My interview with them was 9:30, at 9:30 at night, calling a radio station to do an interview, or visiting ones and stuff. It's a weird life to get used to, that type of thing, but it's so much fun.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about you the most, because you really, really show how you were just the regular guy. You say you're swinging a hammer, and then now you're kind of blowing up.
Yeah.
What would you? There's a lot of musicians that want to make that transition. Would you have any advice for those musicians?
Just take the leap, honestly. I mean, for me, I grew up. I was in the same town all my life. I lived out of that town one time, and that was only for a year, and because I had a cool apartment on the lake. Yeah. And I was only 18 or 19, But all my family was from that town. The only one who my parents had went through a divorce. My dad had moved away. But other than that, my grandparents were there. My brothers and my sisters were there. My mom was there. All my cousins, my uncles, my aunts. Everybody lived in that area. Born and raised in the same town. Everybody knew everybody. Everybody knew who I was just because of who my grandfather was. Never thought I would leave that town. Was scared to leave that town. And the only thing that did it was my record label basically told me, either you got to move here or we just can't work with you. So I had to move. They kind of forced my hand that I had to move. Had I known, I don't want to say how easy it is, but essentially how easy it is, I probably would have moved years earlier. Now that I was so scared to move away, leave my family, be down here by myself, no family and everything, and didn't know anything about the city, didn't know anything really that much about music. Here I'm diving into a new career, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I don't know what to even do to make myself bigger, how to promote myself, and now I'm dealing with publicists and promoters and managers, and it's like it was almost like too much at times. It was overwhelming. But I have friends back home that are trying to make it, or thinking about making it, and there's bands I know back home that for years have like criticized me because maybe I didn't make it as Big and Rich, or whatever. And a lot of times I say back to them, but I've been on the radio. You can play your local bar all you want. I've been on 500 radio stations, and I've toured the country, and I've played big shows and stuff, and I had the guts to move. And that's to anybody, even now, I get people that ask me still at shows, because when you're on stage, even at the Hollywood, they don't know that I'm a local guy now. They still see my sign and stuff, and they think I'm a big deal or whatever, and so they come and talk to me, and they say, man, what's the biggest thing I got to do? I want to make it in Nashville. I said, well, if you want to make it in Nashville, you got to be in Nashville. You don't make it, I don't care what anybody says. I got friends back home that think you can make it not being in Nashville. Nashville's Nashville for a reason. And that's where you've got to be. That's where all the promoters are. There's no promoters in Wisconsin
from Nashville.
Working a guy in Nashville. Like Jason Aldean's promoter isn't from Wisconsin. He lives in Nashville. His publicist, his manager, they live in Nashville. I mean, it's where you have to be. That's the heart of everything. But you got to have that. You're serious enough or not if you're willing to make that jump and move. It's easy to. Anybody all day long can say, man, I want to make it in Nashville. You can say that all you want, but until you pick up and give up everything and move there, and it's, Jason Aldean has a song about, repossess your truck one day, make $1 million the next day. Man, I was there. Man, I remember getting the phone calls. They're calling for my truck. And I needed that truck to be on the road. But I've been there, ruining my credit. I had awesome credit before I ever moved to Nashville. But, man, when you move there, you just don't jump into the scene and start making a living. You need to find shows. And, like, the Horseshoe was a godsend for me because that was a steady once a week or once a month gig for a full week. Paid good money. It made it so I could lock in pretty much a band, and then I started getting the other casino gigs, and then I had bar gigs to fill in with. It's tough when you're making a living off of that. You're totally reliant on other people paying your wage, but you promote yourself all the time. I mean, I was Facebook, Twitter, MySpace was at the time was big, and man, I was on all of those social media sites every minute of the day, and I was kind of not an overly private person, but I mean, my business always wasn't out there. But when you all of a sudden become forced in the limelight, people want to know, are you married? Do you have any kids? They want to know, do you have a dog? What's his name? Do you have a cat? What's their name? They want to know what you do. When do you eat during the day? They want to know everything about you. And that was tough to get used to too. And my label would tell me, you've got to be more, vocal about what you're doing or out there and in presence. And then when we hired a publicist, this girl was awesome, a little Asian chick, and she was hilarious. And she was just so excited about everything she did, and she made everything a big deal. But she would tell me, she's like, you've got to tweet more, you've got to put more posts. People want to know what you're doing, and I would see that, you put a post, all of a sudden comments, people were hitting you. Well, what'd you do this? What'd you do that? What'd you eat when you were there? And it was weird to go from, like you say, nobody caring about what I did to everybody caring about what I did and wanting to know, what my daily life was like. And when you're on the road tweeting stuff, I have to remember, I'm going to a show, got to tweet, I'm on the road headed somewhere. Well, that would generate tons of comments. Who's playing for you this run? And they got to know who was in my band, and they got to know those guys and know their life stories and stuff like that. And that to me was really neat too, to see them taking an interest in my band.
Yeah.
Not that it was, because when we came to town, it wasn't like we just had a band name. It was Derrick Joseph. It wasn't even really Derrick Joseph Band. It was just Derrick Joseph. And but they wanted to know my guitarist. They wanted to know my bass player and get to know him. And they got to know him really well, and then they'd start picking up gigs with other people or whatever. And they'd see him on a show with somebody else, like, oh man, I haven't seen you, and then it got to be where someone were going to the big show, playing for big artists, and they'd be on that big stage, and the next week they'd come back and play for me, and people would see him on the big show like that, and that was really cool. So it was, like I say, the entire process or experience was just amazing. It's there's no way I can see where people say, how do you make it when you go to Nashville? I still have no clue. There is no set way. I've seen people do it one way. I see people do it another way. You can't just sit down and write out a business plan and say, this is how you make it in Nashville. And if you do this every step, you're going to make it. It doesn't work that way. It's a lot of who you know, right place, right times. And I've always said about my career, I've been in the right place at the right time several times, more times than I should have been. Don't know how, but just
it's meant to be.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that. My mom and my sister have always been the one to say meant to be, and I've hated that comment since I was a kid. Always hated
Strike
it. But they say, oh, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. No, it isn't. Either it's going to happen or it's not.
Right.
And, but I got to be believing in that. It was funny because I kind of came full circle on that comment to where I really did feel if it was meant to be, it's meant to be. When I was in a contest to be a house band at the Wild Horse Saloon up there, which that's a big deal in Nashville. I mean, it's the best club. It's huge. They only have 6 or 7 bands a year that become a house band in and out in this contest and such. And everybody wants that gig. And usually you're in Nashville for several years before you even get a chance. Well, I'd only been there like a year and a half, and we got into this contest. And we didn't win. And, each judge had it a different thing, that one would say, well, I had you second, or I had you third, or whatever, or I had you winning. And it was like, I was so disappointed because we didn't win, I wanted to be well, then they ended up taking 3 of the bands. They thought we were good enough. They're like, it was so close that 3 of the bands ended up getting in, and it was kind of like that. Well, it was meant to be. I didn't win, which is what you used to have to do to be a house band there, but I guess it was meant to be that I was going to be a band there. And we ended up being a band there, and that was, like you say, just a neat experience. And it kind of, even all the things that have happened throughout my music, and even with meeting my new wife, has changed even like my faith, like in God and things I believe in that side of it. I've never been, an every Sunday at church type person. I believe you don't have to go to church every Sunday in order to believe in a God or believe in things.
I agree.
But there were times when I was down, and it was like, man, how are these people make it and I'm not making it? And when's mine coming? Or that type of thing. Everybody goes through that type of thing. But in that, if it was meant to be thing, I've said even to my wife, I love my wife more than anything in the world.
I can tell.
And I never thought I would not give up music, but come off the road or whatever. But this girl changed my life, and I love her with all my heart. And it's funny because I went through a time where even my drummer and my bass player, they became good friends of mine. And the drummer left for Florida Georgia Line, and he's very spiritual. He's got a heart of gold. He looks like we call him the Samoan. He's really big and he looks Samoan, but he's not. And but he's just a big teddy bear, or whatever, and he's just got a great heart. And he's the one who would talk to me. He could tell I was down about things, And there's times I'd be getting, like, I put critical comments, like on Facebook or something. He's like, man, you're just getting bitter, which will happen to you in Nashville when you see other people making it and you're not. And there's all this hype around you. I mean. Not sounding cocky, everybody knew who I was in Nashville. You talk to people, and even now, Angela went to Nashville in June, and she's like, seems like everybody I talk to, I say I play for Derrick Joseph down there. Oh, I know Derrick. Yeah. They still know who I was. And, he'd be like, it just seems like you're becoming bitter about stuff. And then I was. Yeah. And I told him, I said, it's hard to, wonder why is everybody else making I'm not, and went through that for a while. Then all of a sudden I met my wife, and it was finally like closure, if any of those other things had happened, I probably wouldn't have been playing at the Hollywood that night, and I wouldn't have met her.
Right.
So it was meant to be that I didn't make it to meet her, you know. And so in hindsight, you know, hindsight's always 20/20. You know, the things that happened in my career were meant to happen to put me at this point in my life, and that's what has given me, they say, different faith about other things in the world or in my life. You know, I like say I never was real spiritual or whatever, but like say had I made it huge, I probably wouldn't have been playing there, and I wouldn't be with her now.
Right.
You know, so for me, yeah, I miss the road sometimes, or I love playing music, but it's more important for me to be with her, you know. And so finally it was like the bitterness was gone. There was an answer to it as to why things happened the way they happened. You know, could I stayed in Nashville and chased it and probably made it? Probably. My drummer still gives me crap all the time about man, you belong here. I can't believe, you know, and he says, you know, he gets asked a lot of times, whatever happened to Derrick? It's just like he fell off the face of the earth, you know.
You're definitely meant to be, because I'll tell you, I had this neat little thing typed up here of all these questions, and I swear you answered every question on here. Every single question, and like perfectly.
Well, thank you.
So much. I mean, so much insight. I mean, I do have like a bunch of questions, like about so many different things that you touched on, like criticism. Like, how do you deal with criticism? Because I hate to put pictures of myself on Facebook if I don't get a baseline amount of likes.
Yeah,
you know?
it's you've got to. They told me that before I moved there. They're like, you got to develop thick skin. You got to get used to having people say you suck, you're too fat, you aren't good enough looking, you know, whatever. You don't this, you don't this, you don't fit this profile, you know. And I had that type of stuff, you know. And it's I had to always remember that, take it with a grain of salt. You know, it is what it is. You know, if I'm too heavy, I can't change it overnight. It's going to take some time, you know, or whatever, you know. Or if I'm not good looking enough, I can't change that. It's the face God gave me.
Right.
You know, I mean, you know, it's how it is, you know. I mean, I can either cut the goatee off or leave it. Those are my options, you know. I can't do much else besides that. But you do have to develop very thick skin, and it's harder, you know, quite honestly, it's harder for women. You know, if you know, some people would disagree with me, but I saw it firsthand for 5 years. If you aren't gorgeous and can dance, you might as well hang it up.
Right.
Because there's girls that are on major, you know, airplay right now. They can't sing to save their life. To be honest, you know, they can't. And you know the studio voice, but they're pretty and they can move, or they got money. You know, a lot of Nashville is money. You know, it takes money to get places. Like I say, we were fortunate we came so close on a small budget. Never thought that would happen. You know, it just generally doesn't. But you know, I was told all those things. You know, I was working with. He used to be Big and Rich's management, and now it's Cowboy Troy's management. His name's Frank Lena. Great guy. Man, he knows his stuff. I mean, this guy knows Nashville. And I was playing a show at the Hard Rock. Just happened to be a band that canceled. Got a call from a buddy. He's like, "Hey, man, they're looking for a band to play at the Hard Rock this Saturday. Cowboy Troy's the headliner. They want like 4 or 5 bands to open for him. Can you do it?" Like, yeah, I don't care who I get. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna do it. You know? And so we played the show, and we were on either right before Troy or 2 before Troy, and it was my regular guys. Man, we just tore it up. I mean, these guys were. I mean, they were showmen. They knew what I wanted. They knew what it was expected of them, and you know, they'd get in the lineup. You know, and the bassist had the hair, you know, and stuff, and everybody just be rocking out. And it was, even me, I just love to watch those guys. Like, even watching video now, I don't even look at myself. I would watch those guys because they're so entertaining. And, man, we just got up and we tore it up. And get all done, and the show's all done at the end of the night. And we're talking with Frank and Cowboy Troy. And I remember Troy says to me, he says, "It ain't nice to come here and show me up." You know, and I laughed, and he's like, "Man, you guys stole the show." Right. And Frank was like, "You guys are awesome," and kept talking to his wife, and his wife's like, "You're going to be the next big thing on Nashville." And so I started working with him after that, because they really thought, he's like, you know, when I'm in all my duds and everything, I'd never been guest over 32. Well, at that time I was 38 or 39. And even to this day now, when I have the cowboy hat on and I'm dressed up like I'm supposed to be, it's extremely rare. Literally, probably 3 times in the last 5 years, somebody's guessed me over 32.
Really?
And so I had that. Frank would tell me, he says, "You got that going for you because you're too old," you know. And I was, you know, and I knew that. You know, generally, if you aren't in your mid 20s,
Right.
at latest early 30s, where they can make money off you for a long time, they aren't interested in you. You know, and plus they're thinking of marketability. 20-year-old girls aren't looking, you know, at a 40-year-old guy and all that excited about him.
Right.
You
Right.
know,
Unless you're
you
round
know,
and thick.
And yeah, you know, so it was like, you know, for me, it was like, okay, he's like, you got that going for you. He's like, you're gonna need to lose a little weight. You know, you're a little heavy. If it's thin down a little bit and work out and this, that, and the next thing. So I worked on that, and I was, you know, next time he saw me, I dropped a bunch of weight. You know.
Wow.
And
that's tough to hear all that about yourself.
Well, I mean, you're in, like you say, you put a Facebook post up, and people are going to criticize you. There's always haters. There's always lovers. There's always haters.
Right.
You know, and they love to tear you apart. And you just got to kind of roll with it. It's you know, in the same way, like I say, there's going to be people that are jealous. They want to be where you're at. I wasn't mainstream. You know, I mean, yeah, I made it on 500 stations, but there's 1,100 stations out there, so there's 600 I didn't make it on.
Right.
You know, but you know, we got a lot of notoriety from what we did, so there were people that were jealous of what little fame I had, you know, my little 5 minutes of fame. So, same thing, like say, they come out and they judge you, and well, you didn't sing that right, or you didn't do that right. Sorry, I'm not perfect. I am human, you know, and you take it for what it is, and you enjoy the ride, and you learn to kind of just not even listen to them. My publicist would tell me the things I needed to know, or my management would tell me, you know, this is what you need to worry about. The other stuff, don't worry about that. So you just kind of let it roll off your back, and you go on with your other day thing, because you're going to get criticized. I mean, it's and like say for a girl, it's even worse. You know, they take a ton of criticism up there. You know, and it's gotta learn to roll with it.
Right. So transitioning from the Nashville scene to playing here in the local arena, we obviously want to feature some of your music here on the radio station. Where are you playing at? Where can we see you?
Right now, well, next weekend I play at Samstown. Actually, a couple of my Nashville buddies are coming down. A couple of my guys were busy, but we're playing at Samstown next weekend. In April, we're in Hollywood and the Isle of Capri down in Lula. We're just working on new dates at Maria's Cantina up in South Haven. We'll be playing there.
I love Maria's Cantina, by the way.
That's a pretty cool place.
Yeah, it is a really cool place.
Great food too, man. I'm telling you what,
they
fat
do.
guy like me knows it.
We love it there.
Yeah, they got good
Burritos.
food, and we're working on also getting in Dan McGinnis. But they can go, if they want to keep up with me, they can go to my websites, DerrickJoseph.net. I have a calendar on there that I update. As soon as I get dates, they're on there. You know, I'm really good about getting those on there, but they can keep up with me on there and find anywhere we're playing.
Well, it has been super awesome talking to you. Like I said, I don't even have to look at my notes. I mean, you answered every single thing.
I love to talk,
don't I mean, it was awesome. I mean, like every question, I mean, you touched on everything, so it's definitely meant to be. That meant to be. You're going to have to start a church.
Come back to
meant
haunt
to
me.
be.
Hey,
Well, thanks.
It's one thing that was funny. You had you brought up, you know, talking about meant to be, and you brought up Kevin Bowie, right? So I met Kevin because he recruited me when I came to Horseshoe, right? So he started talking to me about the 3MK, I think was his group. So it's this hard music, and I'm talking. At the time, I was trying to get my kids a piano instructor. Okay, so I'm listening to this music, and he's like, "Yeah, you know, I got this guy who can piano teach." I'm like, "Okay," so I'm expecting like this black guy, like super cool. And,
Well, it's super cool part.
Yeah, super cool. So I call the guy's number. And then I hear this, you know, kind of frail person that says, you know, MMF, you know, how may I help you, whatever. And it turned out to be Peter.
Oh.
And then I think, Peter, you did some music for 3MK? Or?
Yeah, I recorded their album.
Yeah, he recorded their album, so we had been with him. We've probably been with you about 3 years now. And
Very cool.
And so then, you know, we kind of have all of us
7 degrees of separation.
Like I say, though, if that didn't happen, if you didn't go through the horseshoe, like you say, that
Right.
didn't. Well, it's funny how things work like that. It really, really is, and I see that more every day in my life. Like even like I'm just starting to go partners actually with my next door neighbor because he builds fences, and you know, he's been wanting to get back into doing that, and I have my own construction company again down here. I've reopened that, and but I'm new to the area. Now, like where I came from, I never ran an ad because everybody knew me, and word of mouth. As long as you did good work, word of mouth spread it. Well, I don't know anybody here, word of mouth is working for me, and I've been busy for a year and a half doing it, but I wanted to get bigger. Well, he knows everybody. This guy can talk. You think I can talk? This guy can talk. And so literally last week he put his name out there that he's joining up with me and opening up his company again. We've got 8 weeks worth of work right now, just in a week of him putting it out there. We've been generating bids all week long. So again, kind of that meant to be. Here we moved down here, become neighbors to him, become friends, now becoming business partners, you know, and it's just how the world works, you know, that whole meant to be thing, like I say, has haunted me since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But there's so much truth to it, because it's you know, they, like the old saying, you know, they put you where you need to be or whatever, and I guess that's true, you know, and just like now, even me starting at the Horseshoe, meeting you years ago, full circle to all of a sudden today, where we are doing an interview, you know, and you working with this foundation. It's just how it works.
Well, that is definitely meant to be, and we're, like I said, we're super happy to have you in the studio. And
yeah, I loved it.
so thank you. I have just one last question for you, because it's important to us to know why you as an artist want to be featured as a artist on our radio station, MSMF Radio. Thank God for editing.
Well, for me, I thought it was neat when I received you know, the email first from Saru. I thought it was very interesting and very neat. But for me now, living here and being part of this area, again, I don't think of myself as anybody. I still think of myself as a nobody.
No.
But I have had some success that other musicians might look at and say, geez, I'd like to at least have the amount of success he's had. And I want them to feel like they can reach out to me, because I do love to talk, especially about music, you know. And if I could help another artist locally, and I'm big on, like I say, I come from a small town where people help people, you know. And now that I'm here, if I'm going to live in Hernando, I'm going to be a part of Hernando. And if I'm going to live in northern Mississippi, I'm going to be a part of northern Mississippi. And I want people to feel like they can reach out to me and say, geez, how do you do this? Or how did you do that? Or how would I go about doing this? I will answer any question as honestly as I possibly can with my experiences. And one of those ways would be with this organization. You guys work with these musicians, and they know they can come to your site and see the directory and see who's there and who's doing what, and that type of thing. So for me to be a part of this that promotes something with the local musicians, that's something I, of course, would want to be a part of, because that's what I believe in. Absolutely. You know, so for me, it was kind of a welcome opportunity.
That's right. Well, thank you again. Thank you for coming in and chatting with us, and thank you to our fans for listening.
Yep. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. MSMF Radio. Love Mississippi, love music, and we're out. MSMF Radio. Music. One language.